6 immigrants who for various reasons left their home countries for a new life in the United States.
Hi, my name's Layla Bilal, and I'm originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina in Eastern Europe, and I moved to the States in 1994 to a small town called Portsmouth, Ohio, and then I moved to Columbus in 2005, where I've lived since.
Some traveled with families.
Hello, my name is Neela Upreti. I'm originally from Bhutan. I'm 33 right now. I'm a student going to Columbus State Community College for associate in psychology.
Others made the trek alone.
Hi, my name is Deborah Jan. I'm originally from Uganda. I'm 47 years old and I live here in Columbus, Ohio.
My name is Murtada and I'm an architectural designer. I came to the United States in 2018. I'm originally from Baghdad, Iraq.
I spoke with these folks, our neighbors, about their challenges, families, mental health, and getting adjusted to a new community.
Hi, I'm Asha Abdul and my family is from Somalia. I am currently 27. I work as a therapist and we have been in the States since 1995.
Hello, my name is Juma Acharya. I'm a former refugee from Bhutan. I came in 2011. I was resettled in Rhode Island, Providence City of Rhode Island. I moved from Rhode Island to Columbus in 2012. Since then, I've been working at CRIS, helping refugees as a resettlement case manager.
Their stories ahead on Community Conversation. Hi everybody, I'm Kerry Charles. Welcome to Community Conversation, refugees relocating, rebuilding, and calling Central Ohio home. Russia's invasion of Ukraine led us to this conversation, what it must be like leaving one's war-torn native land to seek safety, maybe better opportunities. When refugees arrive in Columbus, help is waiting for them. CRIS, Community Refugee and Immigration Services, is in part a resettlement agency. It has helped countless families as they work to rebuild their lives and become part of our community.
So CRIS helps with our national partners, Church World Service, and we resettle refugees that come from different parts of the world. We provide them initial support to get them resettled here, find job, get a house, and enroll kids to their school and start their new life in a new place.
How critical is the need here in Central Ohio?
It is very critical wherever it is, not only Central Ohio, but it's very critical, the need for refugees when they come first time to a new place. I have been through that shoes. I have walked on those shoes because I myself came as a refugee and I know what it means. So families, when they come to a new place, it's a strange thing. They are from a very different background, from different cultural background. It is so much different to be in a new place. So it is so critical to help them and also to walk with them for a pretty long time.
We've done this program called Community Conversation on a number of topics: teen violence, mental health for Black professionals, and Black men in mental health. As we were talking this time, I thought we need to do something timely, and that's really going to have an impact. And of course, we were talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's where I want to start the group conversation. What goes through your mind when you see what's playing out right now?
Well, I just deeply feel sad when I see the news, when I see the cities I lived in. I lived in Kiev. And at the same time, I've been through the war in Ukraine, 2014, because I was living in that region, the Donbass region. I was living there for 4 years. So it's something I connected to, the place I'm connected to. I have a lot of history there. I have a lot of memory there. So it just hurts me. It's at some point I felt Ukraine was my home, but it's the same what happened in Iraq in the civil war 2006. It was the same feeling when I see my home is destroying. So it's the same feeling, yeah.
Layla, you have some thoughts.
You know, I'm from Eastern Europe, so Ukraine's sort of a neighbor, and I think what I think about obviously is the tragedy that, you know, any war brings to humanity. I do wonder though too, you know, I think about the national attention that we see in the media that's given to Ukraine. You know, there's a lot of awareness around it. I think also too, I'm hopeful that this could prove to be an opportunity for reflection for the European community, because we've seen Poland and other countries open their doors to Ukrainian refugees and welcome them with open arms. And I wonder if Europe as a whole could reflect on the way they responded to the Syrian refugee crisis, which they refer to as a migrant crisis. So I can't help but wonder, there's a learning opportunity for us here, because I think we have this visual of a refugee. And now that we see that refugees can look like the society we live in, being a very Western society, I hope that we take the opportunity to learn from it and respond differently next time there is, which is awful to predict, but the next time there is a crisis and people need to seek refuge.
Yeah. What do you all think when you see the tragedy that's taking place? Folks are being displaced. Folks, families are being separated. Lives are being lost. What goes through your mind?
So the refugee word itself starts from the 18th century, and we are living in the 21st century. So it has been going for like 3 centuries along. So if the world is still creating a refugee instead of solving the refugee crisis. So it is really important to think how we can stop making people more refugees. So in order to get thinking about the war, how to stop, how to conquer some space, it is really important to think how we can stop creating more refugees in the world.
For me personally, I became a refugee and lived 20 years of my green part of my life as a refugee. So I know what it means to be displaced from a country. But with the situation that's going on in Ukraine, how the people are fleeing and running for life, it is so terrible. It is beyond anyone's imagination, how these people could even get refuge, even can cross the border and go to Poland and seek refuge. I was so much taken aback by the picture of a young boy who was walking in the street, his every family members were left behind. That really brought tears in my eyes. It's so difficult even for us to understand what's going on, and for someone who has been as a refugee and has been spent life under that, the life of scarcity, to think about the future of that boy and numerous boys that are fleeing the country, it is beyond imagination. I can really connect to that, but I really feel that there is a miracle that can stop and these people can have safety.
And then also the separation for those families, and then the boys and the men who have to stay behind to fight.
Exactly, the men. And I being a father of an 8-year-old boy and relating that boy, if he was my son, and I being staying behind for a war and leaving my son on the street and having to find a place to live by himself, it's terrible. I think it is beyond anyone's imagination. What's happening right now is not something anybody can salute.
Deborah, you wanted to key in on that idea that, because it seems it gets forgotten, that families get separated.
Yeah, it's really so sad. It's a humanitarian crisis for sure. I always imagine whenever I see the highlights, I see the news, I just put myself into the shoes of these people, because it's really a pain. I, for one, I flee my country. I left my children over there, but I ran for safety. But all the time that I lived here in the US without those children, for sure, it's the same imagination I put into the people in Ukraine. It is so painful seeing people being separated just because of the war. So it is something that would be held, I would say, with empathy. Yeah, because it's really hard. It's hard.
Will you talk about what it means to be here, to have made that decision to leave your family behind? Yeah. Because many natives don't get it and won't understand it. What went into that?
Going back to my story, I was attacked in my home. I look at the war in Ukraine and I just compare it to my own situation. I was attacked in my home. It is something that I had not planned or thought about at all. So they threw sulfuric acid on my body. So I think you can imagine what takes place. Put that into your mind and imagine what happened to me at that moment. But anyway, it took me over a whole year in hospital. And while I was in hospital, my perpetrators continued giving me phone calls threatening because they wanted me to drop all the charges against them, because at one time they were jailed, but they bribed themselves free. Because I was in hospital, it took me a whole year. So when I left hospital, it is when I realized Uganda was not my home country anymore. I flee to Kenya, Nairobi. And even when I got to Kenya, Nairobi, because of the trauma, and Kenya is so near to my country, I just felt I was not safe. So the fact that I had survived death at that moment, I was like, I think it's time for me to ask, you know. So I ran to the UN and requested for asylum. I sought for asylum. So what I secured was a refugee status. It took me over a year to get to the United States, but I'm glad I got here. So this is where I was resettled.
There was a sense of, I don't know if it's emotion or maybe it's the sense of vocalizing that you realized it was no longer home. How does it make you feel to say that?
It is a painful decision to make because I was a businesswoman in Uganda. So making a decision to leave your businesses, to leave your property, to leave your children, it's a painful decision, but because I wanted to leave, that was the first key that made me flee. And I was like, as long as I have life, then the rest can come in later. So I lost it all, but today I'm happy and I've regained almost everything back.
And yeah, are you connected with your children?
Yes, I eventually got my children here. It took me 5 years, but yeah.
Very good. I just hope that you sharing that, and I'm sure we'll revisit some parts of it, will allow someone else to think about the kindness they can share to someone coming to our country. What led you all to leave your home countries?
So with my family, the civil war broke out in Somalia and my family relocated to Yemen, which is where I was born and my sister was born, and my family was fortunate to get the diversity lottery. So we came to America. Although my parents were refugees at one point in Yemen, they were seen as self-sufficient when they were applying for the documents to America. So that's how we came here in '95.
So diversity lottery.
The diversity lottery is a type of visa that's given out where you apply and they kind of see whether or not you have skills or assets that can be of use to the country you're going to. So you're seen as a professional who can sustain themselves, give back to your community, and essentially be a functioning member of society. And as great as that is, you're still new to the country. You're still new to the area. You might know the language, but textbook English and conversational English is not the same. You might have degrees, but you might have to go and retake some classes to make sure your certification is up to the US standards. And since you are seen as self-sufficient, you don't really get a lot of the support that is accessible to others. So a lot of it is either learning on the fly or being fortunate to have some family member or a distant friend who has been there for a while who can kind of show you how to go about applying for your Social Security, go about finding housing, finding affordable housing, applying for healthcare, and then adding kids on top of that. It's a lot of adjustments in a short amount of time.
Which is why you all are so important.
Yeah, exactly. I think what Asha said is pretty much what we do every day. But when someone comes as a refugee, I think the existence of organizations like ours in the city to give them support, be their back, is so important, so needed thing in their life, because unless you have someone, even if you speak English, I have my very funny story. When I first came to the United States, like I was dropped at New York JFK, and like my niece was like crying for popcorn, and I didn't know that those were called popcorns. We used to call maize back home. Mm-hmm. So then like she was pointing to the popcorn machine and asking me to buy, and I was so hesitant to ask to buy because my English, I was always thinking my English is not going to work here. I was educated, I had my master's degree in science. I was a microbiology teacher back home for like 13 years. So even at that point, having that, I always used to feel I have very strong English, but at the very first day in a new place, the loss of that confidence to ask for a popcorn for my crying niece was not something of my courage. So I have to ask someone, a white young boy, I asked him, can you help me buying that maize? And he said, popcorn. That's how I learned. Mm-hmm. And even in having that English capacity on you and having that confidence, it is not going to work out. As I said, the English that you learn in the textbook and that English that you're going to speak has a very big difference. So having organizations like ours to support refugees or immigrants when they come is so important. It's a very essential part of their initial life.
When I worked in North Carolina, I had a refugee stop me in the grocery store. I did the morning news at the time. And he told me I helped him with his English because he hung on to every word. And I'm thinking, gee, I don't even speak English well. And it's my native language. But he was saying that just paying attention to different words and how the consonants and whatnot would roll off my tongue. I was surprised at that.
Yes.
What other reasons? What brought you all to the States?
So I was like 3 years old when I left my country. Probably like my first language was Dzongkha, the Bhutanese language. But when I came to the United States, to the Nepal, at my young age, I might lost my first language. So I totally lost the Dzongkha because most of the people, they were using a Dzongkha language in Bhutan. So after that, I stayed most of my life. After 3 years, so it is, my country is like a country in a dream. Though like my naturalization paper says that I'm originally from Bhutan. I do not have any sense like how the Bhutan looks like in my real eyes. So it is really sad to say that I don't know about my own country. I stay in refugee camp for 22 years. I resettled in United States through Greece.
What does that mean? What does that look like to be in a refugee camp for 22 years?
Growing there, I was adapted to my cultures from 3 years. When I grew from 3 years all the way to my 26, 27 years old, I was able to adapt those cultures. But there was an insufficiency, there was a lots of trauma going on inside the community, like someone died with lack of health care, someone have problems, financial problems, and could not get any assets to manage their crisis. Those traumas were in the beginning of my eyes, like in the beginning of my life. So it is very hard to get adapted with those kind of situations, to face that situation as normal. I completed my high school in 2007. So in Nepal, you are not allowed to work legally being a refugee. So if I get a master's or bachelor's, what I'm going to do? Yeah. Like there are already sufficient teachers and everything. So there is no point like where your future is going to go. So it is like living a life, something like where your next step is going to step on it. So you do not know where you are going. In 2015, I got resettled to the United States. My whole family were here in Columbus. And we all come to a decision that US is a better place than the refugee camp. So I finally make a decision to resettle in the United States.
This must sound familiar.
Yes. So back in 2006, we had to leave Iraq because of the civil war that started in the year before. So when we left, our plan was to leave for a couple of weeks and then get back. We didn't get all of our things with us. So we went to Jordan, then from Jordan we went to Egypt, then back to Jordan, then I went to Ukraine. And this a couple of weeks that we decided to leave Iraq just until everything settled down. It's became till now. Yeah, and the reason I came to United States is because my family came to United States in 2012. And why they came here, that we just applied in Jordan, we applied to the UN and the IOM, and we got accepted they got accepted in the United States. So they came here, and I just joined them in 2018 here. So a lot of people were saying, like, telling about home. So when I left Iraq, I was thinking that was my home, and I left home. So, but when I came here, it was the first time I feel the word home. When I first came to the house where my parents were living, I was like, okay, now I feel like kind of security.
I was going to ask you, what does that mean?
Yeah, like the security, and this is the place I will live for a long time until I decide to leave. If I decide to leave, nobody will force me to leave. When I was in Iraq, all the war, I was insecure. I was like, okay, somebody will just force us to leave. When I was in Egypt or in Jordan, we were like temporary. We are a refugee here. We have a refugee status, and we will leave this place. So this is not our home. When I was in Ukraine the first time, I was a student, so it's not my home. I'm just here for the degree, then I will leave. Then after that, I went back to Ukraine just to come here to the United States. And even when I was waiting for my tickets or for my acceptance to come here to the United States, I was not feeling this is my home. But when I came to the United States, I was 26 years old. So for the 26 years old before that, I never felt at home. Wow. Yeah, and I felt like, okay, I'm gonna make friends here that will stay for a long time. I will not say bye to him at all. So this is home for me. So at the same time, I kind of decided this is my home when I came here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we all have very shared experiences but unique stories. So I was 5 years old when the genocide in Bosnia started. And I want to be really mindful about the words we use to describe the different types of warfare. So there was an ethnic cleansing that was perpetrated against the Bosnian ethnic group, Bosniaks, against our neighbors and fellow countrymen. And so, at 5, certainly there was a lot of moving around and reshuffling to try to avoid warfare. And then I was living with my mother and my sister. My father had joined the military. He was killed 2 years into the war. Shortly after, my sister, who's 5 years older, was injured by a grenade just playing outside. And you mentioned, kindness earlier, and I was separated from my mother and sister for several months while she sought medical care. We spent time in some refugee camps in our neighbor Croatia's land, and then as well as Italy, before returning back to a different city in Bosnia that was deemed safe. And then the kindness of one stranger who decided to go on a run after watching CNN one day and thought, what can I do to help the atrocities in Bosnia? So she contacted Chris, which at the time was called Interfaith Refugee Services. And she said, what can I do? I want to help. And within 2 weeks, she became a sponsor to my sister, my mother, and I. And so we were given emergency medical refugee status because of my sister's injuries. And so, we were put on a military jet, flown to Germany, to JFK, where I really saw diversity for the first time. And then we landed in Columbus, Ohio. She greeted us at the airport. and drove us down 100 miles south on 23 to Portsmouth, Ohio, where I grew up until I moved here to go to university.
Did you feel that same kind of sense of home?
Yeah, so because I came so young, I'm definitely socialized as American, but certainly, even as a child, you can recognize safety and security. And the town I lived in was very nurturing. My sponsor, Carolyn Pettit, she's the lady sitting in the corner. So yes, I definitely found a home with her and her family.
We have a lot of conversations now openly here in the States about mental health. And even, I would say, 5 to 10 years ago, that's not something that was common. We just didn't talk about it. But you all are carrying some heavy trauma. How do you deal with that? What kind of resources are you seeking? I mean, what do you do?
So, I will just pick up a little bit from what Neela said, because we pretty much from the same background. I was kicked out of the country when I was 13 years old, lived in a refugee camp for 20 years, and spent all those 20 years living as a refugee in Nepal. And the accumulated pain of that 20 years was not exhibited when I was in the camp. I never felt that I have mental health. We could see some part of mental health in the community, but mental health was not taken as an illness back home. It's more like a taboo, social taboo, so people would not even express. And that is what the environment I lived in for 20 years. Even knowing that there is series of things going on in the community and people are stressed out, the death rates are very high, the communicable disease spreading in the camps are killing families, there is starvation, people are not getting enough food, there is insecurity, things were going. All these were creating kind of trauma in families, in communities, but people would not express and nobody would say this is a kind of illness. Coming to the United States, where the Western medicine goes so much with mental health is considered as one very special component of physical health. To understand that, and that spectrum was difficult for people, anyone who has been to the school, even if you have been to a medical school, because that is not something that we studied, that is not something we consider as an illness. So when working with the communities who are coming from that traumatic life experience, I work with people from Syria, I work with people from Iraq, I work with people from Congo, from Somalia. Through my work, I have met people from I'm fortunate to meet people from all around the world, and everybody has accumulated trauma in them. But so many of them do not like to express because it is not something that very much welcome in the community where they came from. Yeah. And also they don't feel comfortable sharing that experience right here when they are new. So it takes time for them to get open up and then share that. It may be too late for the treatment to go, and they are already more vulnerable, but it is a very big thing, especially in refugee and immigrant community. There is a very huge trauma that is hidden inside. Everybody has a bag of trauma inside, but they don't want to open it up because they think it's more like a Pandora box. So there's a big thing going in. And for the service providers which we are connecting to, it is difficult for them because there are not culturally appropriate services provided to them. There's a linguistic barrier. There's a lack of understanding culture because it's hard for any service provider to understand all the cultures because Columbus has become such a metro, such a diverse city, and we find people from all around the world here. So to seek that service, people need to have a safe place. I should feel safe and comfortable to share my mental health concern to a doctor or to a physician. So Columbus lacked that, even if it's a beautiful city, very much welcoming, but service-wise is there. But that is why many of our refugee immigrant communities, when they go to the service provider, they don't open up about their mental health or trauma, but they do have that very huge trauma in their life. They have seen physically, they have beared that, they have been through their war, they have been through the suppression, they have been through leaving the country, the family suppression, family breakup, all those things. And there are kids that have been to, once I was talking to, I also work for a refugee youth mentorship program under my work. And one day I was talking to a boy from Syria and he was saying gunshot is very normal for me. And I asked him, I repeated, what do you mean? It was very common back home, you can hear gun every time, so it's not a big thing.
So he doesn't even realize. I think about kids here who go through the same thing. They think that's normal.
There's mental health. There's a trauma. They have been through that. The phase is over. They are thinking that is very normal. So it is very huge. And to understand that, it is very difficult for anyone to encounter that and learn that at very first. So it needs this sequence of follow-up, sequence of conversation with them. So, yeah.
Deborah, how are you handling your trauma? I mean, you talked about assault, the separation, not being able to seek justice immediately. That's a lot of heavy stuff. And I'm sure there's more that, we don't know.
Yeah, so back home, that was really so hard for me. It is, you asked me in the beginning that what gave me the courage to make up that decision. Yeah, so after not getting the justice, like as a human being, you also feel like you want to fight back. If the government hasn't come in, or the people in power in those sections haven't come in to help you out with such an effect impacted on you. So that made me get the courage of going so far so that I may not get into that trouble of fighting back. So it was really hard for me, but at times it needs the patience because with me, it involved the pain both in and on the outside of my body. I was in too much pain. So by the time I got to the United States, I just felt like actually every day that would come up, I would say, oh my God, I still live. Because at one time, I always felt like I wouldn't make it the following day. I wouldn't make it the following day. So it took me all those months till I got a country to get to. So when I got to the United States, I'm now answering you back. It has taken me a very long time to get that therapy, I would say.
Because you were just trying to live, first of all.
Yeah, I was just trying to, even the courage, if you go to, for those who have seen Immigration Nation, the documentary, where I featured, everybody was asking me where I got the courage to fight for my children. It was after carrying that much pain. And I felt nobody knows the pain, nobody knows how I sleep. Even at the place of work where I work, I specialize more in food, pastry, baking, decorating. So my fellow associates would just see tears flowing out of my eyes the time that I didn't have my children. Okay. So I had the pain of not getting justice, but then I was grateful for having got resettled into the United States. So I was really great, and I'm always grateful for that.
And I still remember those days. I was working with Deborah when I was her caseworker when
I used to cry all the time because of the pain of leaving my little children. You can imagine in the age of 15 and 5, I have 4 children. So I would just cry, even when I see a beautiful plate of food, or I just cry and I'm like, I wish my children would come here. So it is a lot, but it just needs patience. So I can imagine our fellow refugees, because each one of us has a different story and different reasons that have pushed them to come to these different countries. Wherever they are, if they don't get like the resources like Chris offers, I don't know how they really survive. Now, me being here today, this is a therapy. It took me years to tell out my story. It took me, but with the help of Community Refugees and Immigration Services, they come up and it's like, try to get that relief by speaking out, telling out, because if you don't do it, nobody's going to know the pain, but somehow when you tell the story, you're relieving out all this weighted pain on you.
Does it feel like you are regaining your power?
Yeah. This is what I'm up to today. So whenever I come out to say something about the pain that I carried for the past years, it's like going out. It's like I'm letting it out. Yeah, so this is very good therapy.
Well, my friends tell me I'm a good life coach. What? Anybody else want to discuss that trauma?
So one thing I found out just over the years is when I would speak to my parents, since I came here when I was 9 months old, so I didn't experience a lot of what they've gone through, but when you're surrounded by that, there's generational trauma. There's PTSD where they might not even realize they have that PTSD, where you're raised in the sense of almost expecting the worst, where you'd always wonder, like, why are they so hypervigilant? Why do they make sure they always know where the documents are? And it's not until they start opening up throughout the years that you realize, similar to what some of the other people have shared, you don't leave expecting you're not coming back. So when your parents are in that mentality, they almost stay in survive mode. And even after they thrive and they settle, they're always expecting the worst in the back of their mind, where there's that generational anxiety, there could be depression, there could be a lot of PTSD, and a lot of the times it's not talked about because other people had it worse, or we made it here, we're stable now, why are we wallowing on the past? Or there's almost like a sense of guilt where it's like, well, why should I talk about how sad I am when I have my family, I have a home, I have an education, my kids are taken care of. I think a lot of it also goes back to culturally, where some stuff were not really acknowledged. And I know growing up, a lot of it went back to class and privilege, where mental health was something you didn't talk about. And if anyone had it growing up, even back home, my parents would kind of say, if they could afford it, they would go somewhere else and get treatment, even if that meant leaving the country and going to Europe. But not everyone can do something like that. And there might not always be the resources. So I know for me, mental health was something I was very passionate about. And I'm now a therapist to kind of give back wherever I can. And I realized finding the language is really hard, because a lot of times the direct medical term is not something that is translated yet. So you have to kind of describe the symptoms. So you can't say PTSD to be like, okay, well, do you have sleep disturbances? Do you find yourself avoiding people, places, thoughts, or things? Do you have flashbacks? Like, kind of describing all the symptoms to where they can relate to it and then understand and comprehend it's not just a quirk. It's literally, it's something that's inhibiting their quality of life, and really focusing on having them understand that you can acknowledge that without taking away from what you built. You can go from survive to thrive mode.
How about your parents? How do they embrace their daughter as a therapist? And are they paying attention to you? Are they taking notes, following your lessons, suggestions?
You know, they're doing their best, because I know mental health is still something where, education-wise, my parents both came here with their masters and they had to start from scratch again, where education is something where they always said, you want a job that you can find anywhere, that's very stable, that has job security. So saying I was going into mental health, they were like, but is there a career for that? And it wasn't because they doubted me, but they were not familiar, because my entire family went through Bachelor of Science, where there's a course and they know what to expect. And they went back to school at Columbus State and OSU, where they kind of are familiar to a certain degree. So when it came to mental health for them, it was acknowledging that I was doing something different, but also realizing I was doing it because, one, it helped me understand myself more, because a lot of times you start dismissing your own feelings, thinking, but I didn't experience that trauma. But that doesn't mean you didn't absorb some of it by being around it. And really finding out more about my family and going back home and visiting for the first time when I was 18, and really seeing that culture shock where, like someone said, people hear gunshots and it doesn't faze them. I remember going back home for the first time at 18, almost 19, hearing gunshots and dropping to the floor. And everyone's just staring at me, and I'm just like, no one's panicked. And I know by the time I came back after about a year, I came back with a sense of PTSD I didn't even realize, where I was checking under cars for bombs, I was always looking for security, I was scoping out exits, where I was only there for a year and I was in a sheltered environment for the most part. And I came back to the point where my family was like, you need therapy. And that's a big step for them to acknowledge, where it's like, she has stuff that needs to be worked on, and it kind of helped them kind of see how they've kind of been holding on to certain traits as well.
Sounds like this conversation of therapy, I'm thinking y'all grew up with some black folks here in the States, because here, I mean, I think about black culture and how folks just don't want to address mental health and different issues, and it, you know, as much as we are different, we're all so much alike. I want to hear your perspective on dealing with trauma and how you handle it. And also, I start with you because I had asked for 3 words to describe your home country, and you said dark and war. You also said relatives, but dark, war, and relatives. What does that mean, and then how does that show up in a traumatic way?
So, just when I think about it, when I think about the place I was born in, I just feel it's dark there. I never feel it's sunny there at all. When I remember situations, when I remember things that happened with me or at school or whatever it is, even if that situation was in the morning, I feel no, it was night, it was dark there. And I got a lot of flashback when I think, or sometimes when I go to sleep, I feel like, okay, I'm home and there is a bomb car in front of our house, or my dad will leave the house and he will not get back. Then when I wake up or when I think about it, I was like, no, I'm not there. I'm here now. And I got also trauma when I was in Ukraine. The last 2 years before I came to the United States, I was undocumented in Ukraine for 2 years. Undocumented meaning I cannot do anything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't work or just walk around, because if the police will catch me, they will send me back home, and I will lose my status, my refugee status. So sometimes I do stuff just to go around the police, or just do stuff, or think about stuff when I was there. Think about stuff just to prevent facing police. And till now, sometimes I sleep, I feel like, will the police come and knock my door, ask about my paper? Because I was living by myself there.
You still feel this way? This
way now. Then when I wake up or think about it, I was like, no, it's over. Those days are over. I'm here now. So, but how I overcome it, when I think about it, or in that day when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about kind of hope. Like, I will wait because I know at some point my days will be better. And that what happened, luckily. Yeah, so, yeah.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think it is, at the end of the day, the safety for someone to have a peaceful sleep, to have a peaceful sleep, and to wake up with a different thing, you know, and to live in fear. And the life that we lived in fear will always follow us. Even if you find that this is the safest place for me to live today, you will still have that flashback. So that traumatic experience that someone has gone, either because he got broken from the family, or being displaced from the country, or is a victim of war, or whatever happened. So still that lingers, that follows us, and it is not going to leave you. It's going to follow you all the time. And I experience the same thing. I do have the same experience. I have experience of someone putting me in a truck and asking me to drop in the river, or drop by outside the country, or things like that. So those things are very common flashback that normal refugees and immigrants they get. And I totally concur with what you're saying.
And sometimes all the experience we went as a refugee, we went through, make us stronger here in a mental way. Like sometimes we face issues in our days now, And I think about it, okay, but I went through much difficult than what I'm facing right now. So that gave me a confidence that I'm gonna go through this situation, whatever it is. It's easier than what I went through.
Exactly. When I work with the families, when I listen their stories, my story seems to be the problem that I had in my life were very, very, very small, negligible. When I listen to the people, how they came through and what has been through in their life. So we definitely, it helps us to develop that kind of resiliency so that you develop strength inside. There's an immune system that develops inside for you to take care of yourself when you pass from that phase of the life. And when you feel that I am in the United States, I'm in a safer place, that's not going to happen to me, that builds the confidence in you, and that makes you feel more stronger. And I think that's a part of the mental health therapy that you can adapt yourself to.
Does it show up differently for men and women within a culture? Do you all find within your respective cultures?
I think yes. In different cultures, there are different ways of seeing mental health, and in different cultures, men and women are seen separately in a separate component of the society. Like, particularly talking about my own community, I think men are more like superior than women. So men seems to be having less mental health effect than female, but usually
because the women carry more of the burden.
But expression-wise, women do not express that much like men. So it could be the same amount, but it's expressed in different way.
Okay. Also, the answers for this question depends on how much study that is going on in the community. Like if you talk about the Buddhist refugee community, there is no such study going on like the gender difference in mental health. So it is really the answers from your own perspectives rather than the study of the huge group.
So I was a child refugee, and so I think the lived experience for a child is different. I think there's a lot of resiliency and resolve, and certainly I think I experienced psychological effects of the war that manifested itself in different ways, so not apparent PTSD, but also really important what Asha mentioned about generational trauma and the awareness of that. And I know, that's not unique to refugees. It's something we see now in cases of poverty. And, it's such a crucial conversation to be had. It's very much still stigmatized within Bosnian culture, Bosnian diasporas within the United States. But I also think it's stigmatized in mainstream American culture. And so, the conversation is extremely relevant, and refugees provide one perspective to that.
Yeah, I think I'm sitting here and I'm looking that, wrong sheet of paper. You came with your siblings, Asha, you were alone, you were with your mother, older sister, coming with refugees, coming alone. I think that enough. If I have to take a flight to meet some friends for vacation, I get off the plane and I'm like, oh my gosh, I flew 10 hours by myself. And I'm going to release. I can't even begin to understand what it would be like. And you all seem like, some pretty good folks and high functioning. I think I would be in a corner shaking somewhere. I don't understand how, and I guess it's that like you said, it takes time to get there. It takes time to be able to talk about it. And so I commend you all, because I'm sitting here thinking, well, my life wasn't that bad. I had asked or said, use 3 words to describe your experience in Columbus. And I will start with you, Neela. You said diverse community, easy to assimilate, and place with more opportunity. Tell me about that.
So it also varies according to your cultures, where you are from. As a Bhutanese community, we are a big populated community here. So from being in an interdependent cultural background, it is easy for us to find more opportunities. Like if someone is expert in some business, like he can help the other person who is interested in a business. So being an interdependent community and being a big numbers of population here, it is easy to seek opportunity for Nepali people. It is really diverse because like some of the peoples, like I have been actually get connected with the different cultural background peoples. And I had completed my high school in 2007, and I'm still motivated to go to the college after like 13, 14 years. So that is how it developed it opened the doors of opportunity here in Columbus.
Okay. What do you all say? What else? How's your experience been in Columbus? Arriving, getting here, starting over. I know there might have been different stops in between, but Ohio, we like to think of Columbus. We like to think of ourselves as being very inclusive. Has that been the experience?
Yes and no. I find my experience, I've been living in Columbus on and off since like 2001. And as someone who came to the States very young at 9 months, I found it very humbling because even though I was kind of integrated into American culture, when I was at home, I was not around at all. So a whole different language is spoken, and then starting school was a challenge because English was not my first language. It was Somali because that's what I was around. But then starting school, all that was basically stripped from me because my parents were taught at the time speaking multiple languages was a lot to take on, all this was going on, and they really wanted to focus on my English comprehension. So now I feel like to a certain degree, I kind of never got to fully experience my culture growing up, and not because of Columbus itself, but because it was almost like a split identity where at school, this is my culture, this is my identity, and at home, this is my identity, and my parents didn't grow up here. They came here as adults where some of the stuff I was going through, they could never relate to, and vice versa, where that advice and everything couldn't always correlate. So I found it humbling because as I gotten older, I realized I got by a lot of situations because I was able to assimilate in school. Or I got through a lot of things because I knew of resources there, or because my accent wasn't as strong, where little things where I didn't realize at the time were privileges. And then I'd always kind of look back and be like, a lot of it was very humbling, and just noticing it wasn't all just hard work. A lot of it was luck. A lot of it was good timing. A lot of it was being at the right place at the right time, my parents sacrificing a lot. Otherwise, it wouldn't really worked out as it did.
Is there, I don't know if this is a kind of dirty little secret, but within your Somali community, is there a sense of someone who grew up with your background that maybe you're different because you don't have these experiences?
Yeah, I honestly felt like for the longest time I was having such an identity crisis because I don't have the accent my parents do. I could understand the language better than I could speak it. I could understand the different dialects, but when I would try to speak it, I would use the wrong tense, almost like when someone speaks English and they know the language textbook, but they don't know verbal language, where a part of me always kind of felt like I was separated from my culture. And then school was a challenge because even though I was in accelerated classes, I was still being pulled out for ESL. And it was little things where it's like, the higher I got into education and the more advanced I got, the less and less people I saw that looked like me. And then going into the mental health field, even less diversity was available there, where it took me a long time to realize I don't have to pick a culture. I can kind of be a mix of both, but for a long time there really was that feeling of, what am I? And then adding the race part into it, where it's like, okay, I identify as Black, but I know not everyone in my community will say they're Black, they'll say their ethnicity or nationality first, where it was so many layers of navigating and trying to have my family also understand that I'm not cherry picking. I can't just decide to not be Black in public. That's something people see the same way I can't decide to not be Somali. It's something someone might recognize, where just recognizing the different parts of my identity and realizing I don't have to conform to a stereotype or just what the ideal is.
I see why you became a therapist.
Yeah.
That's a lot going on right there.
Right.
What else? Anybody else want to jump in and share before we move on?
I think Columbus is, for me personally, and with the people I work with, I find that Columbus is a beautiful place. Everybody has found it enjoyable because you see the people moving into Columbus from other different city and state. It itself says that how inclusive the city is and how opportunities are blooming here. And not just because of schooling, but there are also other employment opportunities that people, they come here to seek, and then because of that, people become more self-sufficient sooner here than any other city and state. So you see a lot of influx of secondary migrants from other city and state after their resettlement. They try to move to Columbus. So that itself speaks like how Columbus can be considered as a better opportunity city. And for me personally, I find I was resettled in Rhode Island. So moving from Rhode Island to Columbus, the very first day I came to see my uncle here in Columbus, I fell in love with Columbus. I then decided I'm going to move here. I didn't have a plan to go to university. I didn't have a plan to work for Chris. I didn't know what Chris was there, what was it. But then I fell in love because I think
But what about it? What about Columbus made you fall in love?
Because I live in a very small town back in Providence. In a very, very small town by downtown, very in the heart of downtown, and tall buildings. So coming to a small, scarce place, I feel it's more like my home. This is the place I can take fresh breath, fresh air here. So why not? Then I started like convincing my families to move here. But then opportunity-wise, there are so many opportunities that you get. The university schools were in Central Ohio are so much attractive for students who want to pursue. I had a master's degree back home, and I taught microbiology for a bunch of years before I came here. But when I came to the United States, I started working in a hotel as a houseman. And then I didn't think that was the perfect job for me, so I wanted to grow. And I found Columbus as a place to grow. I came here, I worked for 6, 7 years, 8 years. I got the opportunity to go to OSU, I got my master's, I'm in my PhD program now. So like, and people will look at me, people in my community look at me and say, okay, he grew from there to here. Well, my children can grow that way. So it's a place where people can see. So I consider this is a place that we can see ourselves.
And you've been here for how long?
Columbus, 10 years.
10 years, and you said Columbus is small? You know you can't say that around too many people. Folks in Columbus think this is New York. We do, we're guilty of it. I am too. What can we do as a community to be more welcoming to refugees?
So the first, when you welcome the refugee, the first 90 days is a crucial period for them, or their first phase is very crucial. So when I came to the United States, I had a different goal than most of the peoples. Like most of the Bhutanese people who came with me here, they were trying to find a job and try to make some monies and try to be stable financially. But I was planning for different things. I came here with a degree in yoga, so I was looking for some yoga institute. I was planning to go to the college. So I could not find, like when the resettlement agencies or when someone who is working with the refugee, they look as a global, like as a generals for all refugee. But there are some single cases who wants the different thing. So trying to take peek on those peoples who will be more welcoming for individuals like me. Other than that, it is more about the relocational trauma. So we need to really work on a relocation trauma, like how to reduce those things, going back to the mental health and being more welcoming. So in my opinion, those two are the main things that we need to consider for.
Yeah, I think one of the main thing here is developing and investing in refugee, and so Chris is a good example of that in developing refugees. I believe one of the barrier between a refugee, ordinary refugee, to a successful refugee, I think, and I believe it's one thing is the language. A lot of refugees came here with a lot of skills, but the language is the one barrier. So it's kind of from both sides, the community and the refugee person, him or herself. They need to work on their language, and the community should work on developing the refugee or their skills, or sharpening their skills, because like myself, I came from an engineering background from Middle East and from Ukraine. When I came here, the standard is not the same. So I personally took a place, and I went to a Columbus State Community College, and now I'm in Ohio State University. I'm taking classes, not formal classes, not for a degree, but just to developing my skills to become to American standard. And at the same time, giving opportunity to the refugees to work in their fields. As I mentioned previously, refugees, all of them have a special power, going through all what they went through to come to here.
Resilience.
Exactly. So they have skills in themselves, so inhibited in themselves. So yeah, I believe in these two things.
What's going through your mind? I heard you say, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. It's giving them the chance, the refugees, whether they do speak the English, or even those who do not really speak the language very well. It's a matter of pulling them out into the community and giving them the chance to get involved in different activities. Mm-hmm. That's when the communities will be able to tell who has which kind of capability, and because the community will never tell who is who. If they look at one and say, that is a refugee, who is not speaking the language too, they don't know what kind of weight that person has in him or her, because wherever they've come from, they've been involved in certain activities, and if they get these activities and add them together with the people in the community here, then it would make a difference. So it is giving them a chance to come out and express themselves.
And I think because I'm
show their capability.
Because I'm on the panel also, I think you break down barriers and you get to know. I graduated from Linden McKinley High School, and when I graduated, so Linden started off as a predominantly white high school in like the 20s or 40s or something. Became predominantly black. When I graduated, my closest friends from high school are from all different countries. We always say we look like the United Nations. And then I left and went to different cities, and coming back, I find myself only being in spaces with people who look like me. And that drives me crazy. So I'm in heaven right now. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think about the words I've heard to describe Columbus. A lot of people mentioned inclusivity. And so again, I think, challenging our communities to look at, are we truly integrated, or are our refugees, located within certain pockets of our community? Are we truly integrated? Mm-hmm. I think too, so many people that have come have talked about, their credentials not being up to par, and, inviting corporations, organizations, people that have prominent standing and societal privilege to look at refugees from a skills-based perspective and not just education background. And I think that then creates, opens doors to opportunities that, communities within the members of the refugee communities can really take advantage of. And I think too, challenging people's preconceived notions of refugees. I have linguistic privilege, I have racial privilege, and using that for starting conversations about refugees and issues is really important, and inviting other people who have that similar privilege to show empathy through action-oriented ways, I think also goes a long way in terms of true inclusion, which would be integration.
Yeah.
I think Columbus has grown so much so in my last 10 years that I say in working at refugee resettlement program, which is kind of very sensitive at one time. Like I started working since 2012, it was a different political climate then. than having been to the last 4 years before the current president, the 4 years of Trump period, if I have to say by name, those were the most terrible time that we have, and I have experienced that in the face of people and being challenged in front of people. So, but I think that has taught a lesson to people, and people have started speaking out, coming out, being very vocal of being supporting refugees. I think if you want to be a welcoming city, I think you need to be very vocal. You have to be able to advocate for them. You cannot just stay behind, say, yeah, we want refugees to come because we need more manpower, we need more labor force. It doesn't make any sense if you're not vocal. And if you are in the higher political arena, then that is your area, that's where it comes out. But as an individual in the community, I think it's very important to accept refugees as human beings, and they're here to make this community a vibrant community. Because no community can be vibrant with one race or one color. You have to have the diversity. I think that's what the United States is, what the melting pot is. So probably that is what I think Columbus is growing that way. I've seen that growth. I think after, maybe it is blessing in disguise after Trump's era, I think so many things have, even at Chris, we got a very huge, unnoticed donation from people like willing to come, throwing flowers in front of our door. We want to help you, how can we help? Please don't get stressed out, we are here to help you. So community started coming. I think that is a symbol of what Columbus is, and we want that symbol to flower more.
I feel like you just tried to go back and correct when you said Columbus was small. It's like, let me try that again. What I want to start with you, Deborah. As we begin to wrap, you wanted to key in on gratitude. And is that gratitude for being here? Is that gratitude for the opportunity to reach and fulfill the American dream? What do you mean?
Like in the beginning when I talked about the attack that I got, it was so bad. So by the time I came to the United States, I was so sick. Anybody who could look at me, they would just see pain all over me. Today, it is different. I am so different from the person so whichever forum that I get to, I only want to appreciate, to thank the United States. I want to thank the people of Columbus, because from day one, when I stepped into the country, I came in the night. But by daylight, people were showing me love. So the pain that I had on me, for sure, it was there because I was so deformed. I've undergone 27 surgeries to see the Deborah today. Yeah, so that's hard. But people showed me a lot of love till today. So whenever I get such a platform, I want to thank the people of Columbus. And may God bless the people of Columbus. I want to thank the Ohio State itself for having resettled me, and the state as well, the United States. So it is what I wanted to mention. And another thing, I am a citizen of America today. Yeah, I got my citizenship on the 1st of March, 2022. So who I am for sure. I have my children here today. So besides all that I went through 6 years ago, today it's really different. So I've been rewarded back, but from this government. So when you talked about the negatives here in Columbus, I am one person who doesn't have any negative.
That's nice.
Yeah,
that's nice.
I am one person who, for sure, talk about the language, like you get in a place and you hear people speaking, and it's like, oh my God, what are they saying? You speak English, but because of so much that has gone through your life, you don't hear any English anymore. Even when I go to the hospital here, they got me a translator, but I knew English because I've been speaking my English, my British English, since when I was young, but I could not hear anything because of that trauma and pain. But the love everywhere, in hospitals, my community where I work. Today I'm a manager. I am managing people of this country, you know? They give you the opportunity. They don't care how you look, how they don't even want to know your story, but they're like, let's give her the chance. Let's boost her so that she may gain her weight again.
I should have asked you that last, because that would have been a great way to end. Because you all have some shared experiences, you have shared some of the same stories, but there's also something unique that I want to make sure you all get to highlight, and that you get to leave on the floor. So I'll begin with you.
Okay, I'm going to share a scholarly perspective with you. This will be my pitch for diversity. So, in an effort to grow inclusive, inclusivity within Columbus, there's a lot of research on diversity, very supportive of diversity in workplaces and communities. And so, for companies who are looking to hire, to consider refugees, with diversity, you increase the innovative capacity within your workplace and community. You increase performance and productivity, and you increase a metric that we do not talk about enough, which is cultural intelligence. So that CQ piece. And for anyone that would listen to this panel, I would challenge you to, internalize that takeaway and think about what you can do within your workplace to invite diversity.
Yeah. So I am a part of Refugee Speaker Bureau with Chris. So the reason I'm doing that is, the main reason is to change the refugee prototype in this country. And it's changing. We can tell it's changing. So it's from both perspectives, from the community or the country or the city, and from the individual themselves. The individual, when they come here, they say, I am a refugee, I cannot do that, or I cannot work, or I cannot take a degree. But actually you can. And at the same time, the community, they don't give a chance to a refugee because they say they're refugees. It's kind of a prototype. So that's why it's like Leila said, give a chance to the refugee for diversity, and they have skills. They have a lot of skills. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, adding that, most of the people who came to United States come with the different skills. So trying to understand them and trying to adapt their skills and share your skills to them to live in a new place will be a key thing. So whoever watching this panel discussions, I would like to tell them, keep that in mind and try to develop the mutual relationship with the people who came to this place.
Okay.
One thing that really sticks out to me the most is communication is the key to bridging gaps between cultures. And we might not always have that language ability, but you can get to know someone without always talking. You could share a meal with someone, you can go for a walk, you could even give them a smile and try to learn more about someone's culture. And just because someone is learning about your culture or moving here does not mean they should really have to give up their entire identity. It's not like giving up their entire life before this, but they can kind of integrate the best of both into it and really hold on to the good parts of everything and not necessarily be hung up on just the trauma of it all.
Yeah, I would only say it's valuing the diversity should be the key to any employer, any person opening a door for a refugee, or not even a refugee alone, an immigrant. It would really change our country.
I like how you say that, our country.
And if someone listening to this panel wanted to know more about refugees and resources for refugees, Chris is one of that hub where you can come and gather information. We are available 24/7, I should say, in terms of online. But we have a lot of resources. We have linguistically capable staff and a bunch of programs that are serving refugees and immigrants. But if you want to know more about refugees, you're very welcome to knock our door. We're always available and very happy to share the stories, that my personal stories and our friends on the panel who are the products of our Speakers Bureau, and my wonderful co-workers, Tyler there, who is always there to answer your email or phone.
Perfect. I hope you all felt like this was good. It was really good for me.
To learn more about community refugee and immigration services, visit our website, NBC4i.com. Have a subject you think we should discuss? Email me at kcharles@wcmh.com.